Welcome back to GameSpot's Best of 2017 Countdown. We just announced that Super Mario Odyssey was our number 3 game of 2017 as decided on by GameSpot's staff. I won't keep you waiting to get into this montage of a game that I'm sure will surprise everyone. Let's do it.
Trickster.
No.
Welcome to my velvet room.
It's not a game, I'm not a robot, and I'm challenging you. I'm not a phantom, I'm in your face, and I'm here to see it through. Right before your eyes, watch us multiply. Got to summarize, it's
acquired a new vow. It shall become the wings of rebellion that breaketh thy chains of captivity.
Persona 5 from Atlas is our number 2 game of 2017, so I brought on a bunch of Persona 5 fans. Michael Hyam, Jean-Luc Seibke jumped off the TriCaster to come talk about the game. And as always, Peter Brown.
I'm still here.
And yeah, a lot of people argued pretty vehemently for this game. Michael, you were one of them. Why does this deserve to be on our number 2 spot?
A lot of reasons, I'll tell you that.
Start with one.
Okay, I'll start with the themes it tackles.
Okay.
So the Persona 5 is very much about authority figures, about people in power who abuse their power and influence in very devious ways. And you know, as these Japanese high school students, you put your foot down and you say, no, you're not getting away with that shit. And that's very powerful within itself, but the premise gets deeper and deeper. And what you soon realize it's sprinkled out throughout the game, but it kind of builds up to this notion that, you know, society's problems go much deeper than individual people. Like they can be like very shitty people, they can do terrible things, but like it goes deeper than that. Like only one person has so much power. And then what you soon kind of realize is that, you know, as a society, as a collective group of people, you know, you have to, you know, do something about it if you want to make changes. And that's kind of a central theme to the game is, you know, fighting for change. And then, you know, I was playing yesterday and there's this moment where Morgana asks the main character, the cat.
Your sidekick.
Yeah, sidekick. The Teddy figure, I suppose, in Persona 5.
Way better than Teddy.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely ground that. But he asks you something, and he looks at you and says, why don't people do anything about the bad things that happen in this world? And you have 3 answers, and it's like, they can't, they don't have the power to, or they don't care, or they, it's not beneficial to them to act out.
Or they're lazy.
Which
is pretty much the most universal human trait.
Yeah. And
not
so, sure, yeah. No,
No, I was saying, but like Jean-Luc, over the course of the game, as you're actually going into the premise is like as Phantom Thieves, you have the power to essentially go into people's minds, their subconscious, their kind of their mental layout, and you get to change their hearts, so to speak. But they're divided into separate dungeons in each person. It's almost like you're diving into each person's psyche. How do those dungeons play out over the course of the game? Are they how are they creatively laid out? Do they kind of morph over the course of the game? What do you think of them?
Yeah, I mean, they kind of take a different approach. The past Persona games have been using sort of like a randomized layout.
Like procedural dungeons.
Yeah,
almost?
Procedural dungeons, and this game, yeah, they're much more intentionally laid out, and I almost kind of akin them to sometimes they have like a Dark Souls sort of like spiral kind of loop design, where you have these save points, and then as you're going through the game, you will either get new save points, or sometimes you'll unlock shortcuts that go back to like the same save point. There's this one dungeon that has like a central kind of like long chamber, and then each one kind of keeps looping back into that center. So they do clever things like that to kind of keep the dungeon layout interesting compared to the previous games. They also put a lot more like puzzles elements and stuff.
And this is my first Persona game ever, but it was one of my favorite games of 2017. But it did remind me of like a traditional Zelda dungeon, kind of like how each of them are specific theme. Like we're gonna play one in a little bit live stream. Like a bank vault. It's laid out like a bank vault, and like the dungeon itself starts rearranging. And like the more modern Zeldas, leaving Breath of the Wild aside, the dungeons do kind of loop back in on themselves. If it's like a puzzle box dungeon, if you watch like Mark Brown stuff about them on YouTube. But what about the combat here, Michael? As far as figuring out certain enemies' weaknesses, like like personae are like the things you can control. Each person has their own, and then Joker, the main character, he can control a bunch of them. You capture them, and then you can actually use them against the ones you encounter in these dungeons, or in Mementos, the kind of just like that's procedural in so far as that's what you're doing between dungeons. But how does the combat affect your notion of the game as you're going through it?
So this was also my first game in the line of Shin Megami Tensei games, but it's essentially at the foundation. It's a very similar combat system as you've seen in previous SMT games and Persona games, but it's very much refined in this way that it's when you're in battle, especially tough battles, it's almost trying to figure out a puzzle. Like, okay, this character, like in any really good turn-based RPG, you kind of have to figure out, okay, whose turn is it next? Do I need to heal a certain person who might be attacked, or buff their stats, or can I hit this particular enemy's weakness so I can get another turn,
or give it to someone else, like tag them.
Yeah, and you can do a baton pass and pass it to someone else if you have your social link high enough, or confidant.
Yeah, it's the best feeling when you. Well, yeah, I want to talk about confidants. It's the best feeling when you have like 4 different enemies, and you use like a shock weakness on one, pass it off to someone with a fire attack, and then you actually just pass a baton like 4 times. You can just keep going infinitely until they're dead.
Yeah, so knowing the enemy's weakness is kind of the key part of this particular turn-based system, because you get that extra turn and you can knock them down, and and sometimes you can't even figure out their weakness as well, especially in boss battles. So then you kind of have to think, okay, well, if I don't have that in my back pocket, who do I need to buff? What items can I use to make sure that my characters don't die, or I can boost them so they can do even more damage before that enemy has their turn. So it's this constant puzzle that you have to figure out.
And then throughout, between the dungeons, you're preparing for each dungeon almost like you might a heist. You're kind of planning out, oh, we're gonna go in like this. Like you're building your team, and then you're also developing confidence. I want to ask Michael about that. But the everyday life in this Tokyo setting, Jean-Luc, when you're going between like batting cages or going to eat burgers, and everything you're doing is increasing your social stats. How does that part of the game complement the dungeons and the combat? Like this, I would assume before I played the game that this would be the boring part, but that's not the case in this game.
No, I mean, I think there's a lot of people who would like prefer this part, will like put the game on easy because this is the part of the game they like to experience. I think they integrated a lot better in this one. So in previous Persona games, you would talk to your social links or confidants, and you would basically, as you rank up with them, it allows you to create more powerful personas, which gives you boost in combat. But in this one, they have more tangible benefits as well, where, okay, I want to hang out with this politician who's on the screen right now, and then doing so actually increases my chances of talking to the shadows and getting being able to like get more personas. And eventually you can do more benefits like that. Like there's characters, there's this amazing social link that I wish I had done more of, because this person gives you the ability to swap party members mid-battle.
Yeah.
Which opens up.
She's like not chess, but she's the board game
shogi player.
Professional shogi player.
Yeah, but like opening that up gave me like a whole new like suite of options in the combat. Like all of a sudden I'm like, okay, now I can I can try and like manage my SP better by being like, well, I can swap this character out with this character. This one's weak, and that becomes like really critical in boss battle. So I think they do a lot better job just like providing more for incentive to do those social links, and then just like that in turn like makes the combat like way more dynamic.
Yeah, and you touched on negotiations. Actually, I want to talk about those because you don't always have to fight people. In fact, a lot of times there are enemies you're better off negotiating with, talking with. You actually, I mean, you do start, I think you had mentioned, like, you do start to see through the cracks of how they work, like specific characters. You see the connection between what they say. Yeah. I will say that it still was a good change of pace from the fighting, like figuring out, oh, they just said this, so that means they're kind of insecure. So then your next answer, the follow-up, almost you have to play on that in order to either become friends with them and make them trust you or make them intimidate them. It's almost like the psychoanalysis that makes the combat like a, not secondary, but it is a good change of pace from the combat.
Yeah, it keeps it interesting.
Yeah. What about the negotiations? Were you doing those often throughout the game, Michael?
I really like doing all-out attacks, so negotiations were kind of my secondary option. But you know, you can juice them for like even more money as well. Like as you get better speech skills from anime Bernie Sanders. And there, you can actually extort more money out of the enemies. So if like, oh man, I'm low on yen, but I want to buy new equipment for my party. It's like, yo, I'm just going to keep asking them for more and more money. I didn't really use the one where you can ask them for items. Like I was just like ask for money to buy the items I want, and then like wielding their power to create more personas. It's almost like this Pokemon-esque kind of structure in that when you capture their persona, you can use their abilities or you can fuse them in a very vicious manner. When you go to the Velvet Room, you literally like line them up on guillotines, chop their heads off, and then they fuse.
Hang them to get like, what does hanging them do?
Hanging them transfers their power to a different persona.
To another persona. Okay.
Yeah, it's quite brutal,
pretty dark.
Yeah.
Like the Velvet Room in general is always creepy as hell with Igor.
Igor,
the dude, the main.
your boy
He's
since
like
day
a
one.
consistent character from the games, right?
He's been in since the first game.
But like as you're building confidants, Jean-Luc, some of them become party members. We don't have it on the screen right now, but in our room we see like Makoto, Yusuke, and then
work on your
and then An. Well, in my defense, this game.
No, the game says Yusuke.
They say Yusuke all the time.
That's the one they get right.
Oh, okay, whatever. But in my defense, this game did not help me with my Japanese, the North American acting at least. But Timur Hussein told me I would be dead to him if I didn't mention and agree with him that Makoto is the best girl.
She sure is, man.
Yeah, she's the student council president, and then like starts breaking out of that.
It's actually pronounced Makoto.
Yeah, Makoto. But
she starts breaking out of that shell. I'll let you guys pronounce the names from now, and I'll add color commentary. But like you're developing these confidants. Some of them just lend you skills, but others become party members. And thematically and narratively, it's interesting how they're real. I know this is nothing new for the series, but I really enjoyed how the parts of them that they suppress, despite the fact that it really does kind of dictate their personality, come out in the Phantom world, whatever you want to call it.
Metaverse.
Yeah, metaverse. I was gonna say upside down, just for the universal more thing. But did you have any favorite characters, or like what was it like building the relationships with these characters? Did you actually feel connected with them, or did you feel like it was just a gamified kind of thing?
No, you definitely feel connected with them, especially like because the game lets you choose like which ones you want to continue like developing further. So it's like, okay, like I'm actually pretty invested in Makoto's like relationship with her sister, and I kind of want to explore that further. And the game lets you.
Sorry.
So the game kind of like you get the stuff through the main story, and you get to kind of experience these characters, and but then also the game lets you like choose which ones you kind of want to like continue to explore and get to know better. And I mean, this game's long. It's like 100 hours, but by the end of it, I think the length works as far as like developing that relationship with those characters. Like it wouldn't mean nearly as much watching if it was just like a 20-hour thing, or even like a movie. Like they're doing an anime of it, and the anime, like they did one for 4 as well, and it was a good anime, but you don't get that same connection that you do like putting 100 hours into these characters
and deciding where to develop the relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you as the player you feel like this is your connection to the characters. And like you said, my first playthrough was 120 hours, and when you get to like sit on those story beats and the developments of the relationships, you get to stop and think about this. Things aren't always happening. You get to stop and smell the roses, for lack of a better term, and I think that helps the character development. It helps you, care about your core cast and everyone else that you kind of helps you along the way. And I really felt connected to this game, and then it made me want to go back and play the other Persona games and see what they had to offer. And those things are there as well. I feel very connected to the cast of 4 and 3, and 5 being able to portray that even better and motivate someone to go back in the series is quite powerful to me.
And while we're watching the B-roll, just the sheer amazing fucking presentation in this game, between the soundtrack, the transitions. Jean-Luc, you used a few of them in your montage that you did that video earlier that we watched, and just everything about it just exudes like style. It's just the most confident game ever, and immediately it hooks you. Right away, I'm just super into the universe. I'm like, when I first started playing, I was like, whether I like this game or not, I respect what they're doing right now, and I ended up loving it. It was one of my favorite games of 2017. But the more I played it, the more I'm like, they just like, even like the characters, like when you meet specific characters, the way that the screens and the loading screens and the attack screens, like the all-out attacks change for whoever initiates the all-out attack based on like Ryuji's will be like a lot of punk stuff. Speaking of Ryuji, I do want to get into it. I did not like Ryuji at first, but this kind of encapsulates why I love this game. Throughout, I did a video essay earlier in the year about why this reignited my love for like Japanese-style RPGs. I absolutely love how it was constantly subverting my expectations and messing with RPG tropes in general. Like Ryuji starts out as this angry punk kid.
He's a brat.
Yeah, he's a brat, and then you start to figure out, like you start to hear his backstory, and of course, like it's nothing new, making you empathize with characters you might not think you might. But Ryuji became my favorite character in the game outside of like people you meet later on. But it was just the way it actually subverted. Like it never felt like I was grinding, even though you kind of do have to at certain points. When it comes to mementos, you might have to, but I just never felt like I was wasting a day, despite the fact that there's time management. And this game was so good at subverting JRPG narrative tropes and gameplay tropes and like just RPG tropes in general that it was constantly keeping me guessing. Like I don't know that any other game has. Did you find the same thing, Michael?
Yeah, definitely. I've played a lot of JRPGs in my time as well. I grew up on them at a very young age, but here this is different because you almost have this like social simulator part to it, which is kind of what drives you to care about this world in many ways. And then so, you meet these characters first and then you kind of have an initial impression. But of course you dig deeper and you learn about their desires, what drives them. And, for example, you said Ryuji, you kind of like, once you get to the end of his social link, you kind of understand like why he is the way he is and like how he can be better. Even like Makoto, her initial intro in the game is that she's like a A+ student who's like a teacher's pet and stuff, but she's very conflicted even early on in the game, between her sister and then Akechi, who's like being like really smug to her, and then how the Phantom Thieves initially was like, she's just trying to get us caught up, she's a snitch, and then she's like, nobody accepts me.
Verbatim.
I'm trying my best. Like I'm trying my best, but nobody accepts me, but I do have this desire to instill justice, and I think that by way of the Phantom Thieves, I'm going to join them and express everything that I've been feeling since she was a kid, because if you go into her backstory and her father and all that, it's like she finally unleashes that inner passion and she joins your party, and that's part of why you care about these characters. Like their stories within themselves aren't like revolutionary, but when you have like 10, 15 of these stories all put together, driving to the same goal, I think that's what makes Persona 5's cast and characters and story very special.
And at like a certain point in the game, it starts to ask whether what you're doing is actually just and righteous. I mean, like a lot of superheroes tales do that, and you're essentially like psychic superheroes in this game, to be reductive. But it starts to question whether you're not the bad guys. You are going into people's minds and screwing with their wiring to make them better people, so to speak. And like a lot of them admit their guilt and do become better people. But there are like implications that come with that. Like, is this even moral to do that? Do you think the game did a good job of making you question your own actions throughout, Jean-Luc?
Oh, definitely at the end. I mean, they really start to get into that. I would say the game maybe doesn't. At the end, it is sort of like still like, no, we still did the right thing, and I guess that comes down to like how your personal perspective, because I felt like, yeah, I think they did the right thing too.
I felt like a shitty person.
But the game definitely does make you question that. Like the characters have like this, crisis of faith about what they're doing is right, and sort of like the realization that kind of like where you talk about that it's just like society as a whole is the problem, and that like it's not just about we can change we have to force this change on people. We need to get people to realize to make the change themselves.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the larger theme of the game, and
It's
like
definitely not one note. Like it does sprinkle that little bit of doubt, but then by the end you like kind of figure things out. You're like, nah, we doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's a really good feeling too, because when the whole cast of characters that you care about kind of realize, and then when you go into this game that has so much style, so much confidence, like even the main character is like smirk, and like every time he does like the all-out attack and stuff like that, it's just like, wow, I really believe in what they're doing and what I'm doing along with them.
What'd you name your main character? Do you remember?
I did a shout out to the Giant Bomb Persona 4 Endurance
Charlie
Run.
Tanoku?
Yeah, Charlie Tanoku.
Oh, nice.
That's my boy,
Oh,
man.
Gotcha.
I named him Akira because that's the comic,
the- yeah.
that's the manga name for him. So
Gotcha.
I just went with that one.
Persona 5, one of the more memorable games of this year, stylistically, narratively, in the ways it subverted its genre. It was one of my favorite games of the year, and a lot of the GameSpot staff happened to agree, so that's why it got to our number 2 spot. If you're watching this on GameSpot or YouTube after the fact, please go catch up on our first 8 games that we've announced. Is that right? We're on this is the 9th game we've announced, but it's number 2, yeah. So go catch up with all those. You can watch our discussions and our live streams, which we've archived, playing those games. If you're watching this live, we are going to be talking about our number 1 game of the year, which I'm sure nobody knows what it is, but we're going to be talking about that in a little while, so stick around.